Thank you very much, Arnold. Once again, you've given us a lot of food for thought and raised a lot of the key issues that we need to move on as a region. I always find it interesting that when I talk to my parents and people of their generation, movement of labor happened without a CSME construct. And in fact, it seems to have worsened rather than improved with the introduction of the Skilled Nationals program, because it has established limitations where none existed before. And people moved with Barclays Bank all the time. I know people here who were born in Jamaica because their parents were posted at Barclays Bank, and they know places like St. Thomas and Bull Bay and wait a bit. And there are people who have been all over. One of my colleagues here was born in Jamaica because his father was based there from Belize. So, you know, the movement of labor occurred independent of this construct, and now we've introduced a construct that has actually seemed to make it worse. But at any rate, we can discuss that ad nauseum. The other issue I wanted to comment on was the issue of joint diplomacy. I have always argued that I don't understand why we don't have a joint mission in Brussels and one in Geneva. I do not believe that we have such disparate interests where those multilateral areas are concerned that we could not have joint missions there. Just imagine if we had a 15 to 30 man mission in Brussels, what we could do, instead of 15 or 12 different missions with 2 people each. It frankly is nonsensical. In addition to which, in Geneva, the same thing applies. Why can't we have joint missions in those multilateral fora where our issues are not different? However, I just wanted to throw that out there. Minister, I hope you're listening. So let us move on. Finally, we have Ivan Ogando from the CARIFORUM Directorate. You can do it from anywhere, wherever you feel most comfortable.
Well, speaking after such distinguished panelists is a tough act to follow, especially if you're not English-born, speaking-born person. But bear with me with my English. Since this is a colloquium, I'm just going to share with you some ideas on this task. I mean, going through the pages of Time for Action and listening to Sir Treated, I couldn't help to think that this excellent group of men and women that were part of the West Indies Commission were really committed to a vision that 20 years later is still alive, and it's still a significant tool in order to show the way for the entire region. I have to say that you know, Time for Action was as far as I know, the first document that approached the region, approached the greater Caribbean. You know, it just brought this Caribbean region outside the English Caribbean club, which for historical reasons and everything like that had, you know, constituted the West Indies Federation, CARIFTA, and then CARICOM. So there was this vision of a greater Caribbean, and I think that, you know, looking back, we have to say that, well, we have the Association of Caribbean States, which I think that the West Indies Commission planted the seed for this Association of Caribbean States, which incidentally will have a ministerial meeting next week in Haiti. And, you know, we can discuss the ACS, that will be the subject, but it's there, and it provides a forum for the wider Caribbean to come together and discuss cooperation, initiative in terms of transportation and trade, environment, etc., with other partners from the G3, Mexico, Colombia, Venezuela, Central America, and Cuba, of course. And also, I think that Time for Action played a very important role in terms of the expansion of CARICOM itself, with bringing in Suriname in 1995, and then eventually Haiti as well. And also, it changed the mindset to a certain extent to bring about other integration cooperation scheme and trade scheme, such as the CARICOM DR trade agreement, the CARICOM Central America agreement also. And then, you know, it helped to ignite this thing. But unfortunately, as Sir Sridhar had mentioned, there was not a follow-up. And the main recommendation from in terms of setting up a commission to follow up and on the recommendation of the report was not there. So I said that if there's something that have characterized our region, as the Caribbean, it's like we get to a certain point. We put together the schemes, we put together, you know, the minds to work on things, but when it comes to execute and implementation, that's where we fail. And well, we have failed. If you look at some of the agreement, well, the CSME schedule is way off. We have some successful with the OECS single economy, but the CARICOM DR trade agreement is stagnant. And lately, we, as I mentioned earlier, you know, we have the CARIFORUM EU Economic Partnership Agreement, which is the latest of these schemes that have been put in place in order to foster regional cooperation and integration. But, you know, the rhetoric of regional integration have gone way far that our actions in order to cement regional integration. And IPA has not been an exception, unfortunately. According to the latest statistics released by the European Commission, export of goods from Caribbean ACP countries to the EU has practically remained stagnant in 5 years of the implementation of the agreement, going from 4.5 billion euros to 4.6 billion euros between 2007 and 2011. With regard to trading commercial services, which we all hope that IPA would, you know, would bring about services, it was the beef of the IPA, you know, the new aspect of the IPA, you know, services and trading services. According to the same source, CARIFORUM members exported 4.9 billion in 2009, while the corresponding figure for 2011 was 4.7 billion. Inflows of EU foreign direct investment in the region have also fallen short on the regional expectations. As a matter of fact, the stock of EU foreign direct investment in CARIFORUM has decreased from 22.6 billion in 2009 to 19.4 billion in 2011. Of course, this disappointing performance is due to several factors. The first factors in a list, which by no means it's intended to be exhausted, is that implementation of the IPA has coincided with the worst economic and financial crisis in more than 80 years. Its effects, which include negligible or no economic growth, high unemployment, and burdensome national debt in most of the major trading partners, as well as in CARIFORUM states themselves, have also reflected in the pace of the implementation of the agreement and its results. Second, the second factor is that there has been a significant gap between the signing of the IPA and the actual disbursements of the regional funds allocated under the EDF support to facilitate IPA implementation. While IPA was signed in October 2008, implementation of the 10th Regional Private Sector Development Program, which is one of the flag programs for IPA implementation, only began in mid-2011, and the implementation of the 10th EDF IPA Capacity Building Program will only commence in the first quarter of 2013. The effects of this gap on the pace, especially of IPA implementation, cannot be underestimated. Of course, that doesn't take the responsibility from our governments to allocate resources to support the IPA implementation. A third factor is the amount of aid for trade resources made available to CARIFORUM states since the signing of the IPA. The amount has fallen far short of what the region had anticipated, and has the number of partners of EU country provided, and also the number of EU countries providing that help also has fallen short. It is clear that with the exception of the United Kingdom and Germany, EU members have not fulfilled promises made during and after EPA negotiations. The fourth factor refers to the supply side constraints faced by most CARIFORUM economies, both in the areas of goods and services. Preferential market access by itself is not enough if the region cannot deal with the supply side constraints that include transportation, private sector financing, production efficiency, innovation, and other elements of the value chain of production. A fifth factor is that since CARIFORUM states signed the EPA, the EU has finalized free trade agreements with Korea, Peru, and Colombia, as well an association agreement with 6 Central American countries. Each of these agreements represents an increase of competition to the European market, since it constitutes an erosion of the preferential terms that CARIFORUM negotiated in the EPA. In view of the above, and the region needs to redouble its effort and to take full advantage of the provision of the agreement and to establish its products and services in the European market in an efficient and competitive market. One of the difficulties that I've seen in my 2 years, the CARIFORUM director in implementing the EPA, is the approach to EPA implementation that has been taken in some parts in the region. And we have seen the EPA. The EPA is seen as like competing with CSME or competing with CARICOM DR. And I remember that in the EPA negotiating process, the approach was completely different. It was just having the EPA to complement the schemes that we already had. And so a lot of discussion has been done, and it has been a constant struggle, you know, just like, well, EPA against CSME, EPA against DR, CARICOM, EPA against other schemes. And I don't think that is the approach. I think that the region needs to embrace EPA implementation, as needs to embrace the implementation of the other cooperation and trade schemes, not as an alternative, but as a complementary tool, basically, as a tool that is complement to those efforts. And this is the lesson that we have to learn from Central America. Central America negotiated their association agreement, and they went as far as setting deadlines for specific actions. You know, they knew that they had an implementation deficit in their own regional integration process. So they used the EPA in order to force themselves to implement the necessary changes and structural, political and legal changes in order to facilitate implementation. I'm not comparing the Caribbean I'm not saying that the Caribbean to copy exactly what the Europeans have done, but just to take that perspective. Of course, some of those things are easier in Central America because of the geographical configuration. But I am talking about the approach, the mentality on how we approach to do these things. And I definitely, in this sense, I definitely agree with what Arnold have said earlier in terms of finishing the business of time for action. Finishing the business of time for action will not only help our traditional cooperation scheme, but EPA itself to be better implemented in a more efficient way. And I certainly welcome Minister Pinder's mention of Article 238, because Article 238, sometimes when you mention after it was signed in the EPA, you know, sometimes some people just react. And I say, well, what have I said? And then even as a principle, I don't think that as a principle, we should give the European better treatment that we give among ourselves. So that is the spirit of Article 238. And there might be some difficulties, but then let's sit together and discuss on how to best implement this thing. And again, it's it's to complement other efforts that we have done in other integration schemes. Finally, I have to say that something that Pan mentioned and earlier this morning. It's in terms of the issue of differentiation and our relation with the European. It is clear that our relation as a region with the European, our main development partner, has changed and is changing, and not for the best in terms of Caribbean interests. Basically, in our discussion, we always maintain we're not against differentiation. Differentiation is a principle in the Cotonou Agreement. But we are against the approach of differentiation to which by you actually punish middle-income country for doing well and concentrating resources in a few other countries. Of course, there's differentiation. We are all different. In the Caribbean, we all have different levels of economic development, and we have different needs. But the approach to differentiation could never be, just taken from those that have performed well and that would result in a reduction of allocation of most CARIFORUM states. Particularly, I must say, in a context where CARIFORUM has demonstrated its commitment to the partnership with Europe by concluding an EPA in time. Still, the Caribbean remains the only ACP region that has an EPA, and also concluding a joint strategy in a good time. This doesn't send a good signal for some, and it has even started to question the goodwill of the EU has traditionally shown to its Caribbean partner. Nevertheless, the lesson is that for the future, Caribbean countries should be prepared to depend less in donors' aid and to redouble its efforts in order to allocate resources for its own integration and cooperation processes. I thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to thank all the panelists for their insightful comments and basically answering the question, where are we now? I think we know where we are now. I'm not sure it's such a good place, but at least we know. But I just want to give a short summary in a sense. I think Sir Sridath expressed the pain of those who were there 20 years ago and who pulled together this seminal report, which in a sense, had it been implemented, particularly the commission and the institutional structure that was recommended, we probably would not be having some of the issues that we have now in terms of representation and in terms of negotiations. We look at the issue of the rum. We would not have, in my view, come to this stage had we caught it earlier. The issues with the implementation of the EPA, the non-implementation issues, the non-execution, the fact that we continue to move backwards, frankly, in terms of our regional integration process. So the question is time for action still relevant? Yes, it is. It's even more relevant now than it was 20 years ago. The question also is, what do we now do? And are we committed to making it happen? What is stopping us? And can we rise above the increased insularity that has occurred in the last 5 years within the region with respect to the movement of people, with respect to the issues of capital movement, with respect to issues of contingent rights? Why haven't we moved forward? I mean, there's a case being tried now that we all know about. The second sitting of the Caribbean Court of Justice is this week in Barbados, looking at that particular issue. And it raises serious questions about our commitment. It also raises serious questions given the fact that I think no more than 5 of our member states have ratified the Caribbean Court of Justice as their court of final appeal, which, you know, it suggests to me that we have some fundamental issues to address. So I think we've set the stage. I think we have a lot to move forward on. I think Dr. McIntyre's mention of our or lack of a relationship with the emerging markets needs to be addressed and addressed quickly. The Brazils of this world, South Africa, the Chinas. We need to begin to move more expeditiously on developing those markets and getting intros into those markets. Let me stop there. Thank you very much.